Hello YouTube. So this is the first video of my step-by-step overviews and read-through of my Valiant Deluxe hardcover collection. So the last video was hopefully just kind of introducing my collection, just saying I'm going to read them and work out my own reading order. And so no further ado, today I read Divinity. So Divinity this is the deluxe trilogy. Nice standardized spine. This is the back. Earth is about to meet a new god. And this is the cover, which is an amazing picture. Before we get into it, I just want to point out that there is another deluxe hardcover called Divinity, which is only of the first Divinity arc, which is the first 4 issues of Divinity, whereas this collects the entire trilogy. So if you look in the back here, you will see it says this collects Divinity 1 to 4, Divinity 2 1 to 4, Divinity 3 1 to 4, and then a bunch of spin-offs as well. Whereas the original deluxe hardcover is a much thinner hardcover, which only collects the first 4 issues, but it does have the same cover without that tagline there. So just be aware when you're picking up a deluxe hardcover. So, related to that, let's just have a look under the hood and just see what it looks like. This is what the hardcover looks like there. We can see the inside of the dust jacket, absolutely standard, generic, quite boring end pages to be honest. Okay, so I'll just slide the dust jacket off there. Nice. Put that to one side, and what we have here is Divinity. So let's have a quick flick through and I'll talk you through it. So I read this today. This is pretty much the first Valiant comic and hardcover that I've read. I've read a couple of other little bits and pieces, but Divinity is me now diving into my collections. Just to clarify the reading order, Divinity, the first 4 issues, Divinity 2, Divinity 3, then there's 4 spin-offs from Divinity 3, then there's Divinity issue 0. I will stress that Divinity issue 0 does come after Divinity 3. It's not a prequel issue. It shouldn't be read first. If you're reading these in singles or anything like that, Divinity 0 should be read right at the end of this trilogy. Which is why they put it here, so this is really good mapping. And the standard, this is what I gather the standard kind of Valiant layout is. They don't have any other kind of guff here, they just have the covers involved. So this is Divinity. And all of Divinity is written by Matt Kindt, I believe. And this is one of the first things I'd read by Matt Kindt. So I'm just going to flick through, let you guys have a look at what the artwork is. Oh, this is the main guy, Adam Abrams, who ends up becoming Divinity. That's not a spoiler, the entire comic is about that. Really interesting. He's Russian, and he's black, which a lot of people, well, no one's really mentioned to me. I didn't realize Divinity was a black guy. I thought it totally makes sense, and it's cool, but at the same time, it's an interesting kind of decision given that it's meant to be set in 1950s Russia, and it's like, it seems a little bit incongruous, but nonetheless, all good. And then, yeah, I'm not going to give any spoilers or anything here. What I will say is this comic was a little bit of a disappointment, tonally speaking. I didn't quite get the feeling I expected to get from it. I'd expected it to be kind of like a comic about a really super powered, Omega level, ultra powerful superhero type character. A little bit like Sentry in the Marvel comics. And that's not the vibe and feeling I got from this. Oh, by the way, this comic, as you can see, it contains Ninjak, it contains Exo Manowar, there's Livewire, and there's the Eternal Warrior. So this immediately crosses over in the first few issues of Divinity with the existing Valiant universe, as you can see here. I hadn't realised that. I know enough about the Valiant universe, like really superficially, that this wasn't an issue. Like I know Exo Manowar is a dude in a superpowered suit, Livewire is basically a mutant, Ninjak is essentially like a ninja. James Bond crossed with Wolverine. So I knew enough that it was okay, but I guess, to be honest, I read this in the wrong order. And when I do my reading order, I will probably recommend you read this later on after reading stuff involving those other characters first. So, in terms of this, what's the story about? Well, it's about this guy, Adam Abrams, goes off into space, comes back as Divinity, and this is written on the back of the comic on the blurb, so I'm not spoiling anything. But what I will say is that tonally, it didn't have that kind of like whiz-bangery, didn't have the kind of the impact and the the sort of kineticism and the action and the drama that I really kind of expected. Like I say, when you have these Omega level super powered characters being introduced into a comic universe, like for example Sentry, I expect something, I don't know, maybe with a bit more bang for my buck. So I don't know, it was cool and I enjoyed it, but ultimately it wasn't fulfilling to me personally, and as a result a little bit of a disappointment. I will point out that the Divinity 2 series, which is I think these issues here, the Divinity 2 series is actually in my opinion better than Divinity 1, and better than Divinity 3. I think Divinity 2 was the strongest point of it. Anyway, so that's Divinity 1 and 2, and then Divinity 3 starts here. And in Divinity 3, there's cameos from other characters like Bloodshot and Toyo Harada and people like that. Again, I've seen the Bloodshot movie. I'm aware who Harada is, having read a couple of issues of Harbinger. So ultimately, I wasn't lost reading this, but at the same time, I do think that I have read it out of order. Interesting, like I say, it's not a comic people talk about much. I knew very little about it. I didn't realise there were these other characters in it, like Mishka and these various other people. I didn't know anything about Adam Abrams and his background and sort of his position politically within Russia and the whole sort of thing. I didn't really know anything about it. So I went into it with really high hopes based on very little. And as a result, kind of disappointing. It was still good, and I'm glad I read it. And I'm glad I bought it, mainly because it's a beautiful deluxe edition. Oh, this issue here is written by Jeff Lemire and I believe is drawn by Clayton Crane. Yeah, who does amazing digital artwork. But yeah, it was okay. It was okay. It hasn't put me off reading the rest of my Valiant comics. I'm glad that I own it. It just wasn't quite what I expected, and that's really more of an indictment to me. But what I would say is if you have similar tastes to me, maybe you want to try and borrow this from a library or something else first. Yeah, and then the issue just continue. Oh, here we have issue 0 of Divinity. Like I say, this is set at the end of all of them, and that's when you should read it. I'm just going through here. It's a decent comic. Maybe it's too intelligent for me. It's quite meta, it's quite clever, it's quite cerebral rather than action-packed, and maybe it's just over my head. And then in the end here, you've got quite a lot of bonus features. So you can see all these things here, and there's page after page of like breakdowns and artwork, and really good. I love it when hardcovers include this kind of DVD-style commentary. Really, really like this. Yeah. So that's it. That's the Divinity Deluxe hardcover, the very first Valiant hardcover that I've ever read. Love that image. That's the sort of thing I'd get as a poster. Love the character of Divinity as well. I mean, Adam Abrams is he's just a legend. He's really interesting. Even though it feels like he's underutilized, I think is probably the best way to put it. And I really love the aesthetic of his armor. Like on the back, you can see he's got these like cool like 3 things on the back of his armor. And the whole thing is just it's very cool. But at the same time, it felt to me a little bit like a missed opportunity, or maybe it's unfulfilling for me. But then, having said that, I guess I'm quite a shallow reader. I prefer my action quite straightforward and less cerebral. Yeah. Anyway, there's more artwork, more black and white, and that is the entire hardcover. It was a breeze to read. Took me about an hour and a half. As I say, it's pretty much a standalone, even though it does include things like Bloodshot and Livewire and Toyo Harada and people like that. Even though they are included, like you get a reasonable introduction to them and their abilities and what they're capable of, like here Ninjak, just in terms of the story itself. So don't worry if you just read it out of continuity. Okay, cool. I should note that after reading this, I actually also went away and I read another comic released in 2018 by Valiant called Eternity. In fact, I will put up a picture of that here. Okay, so that is Eternity by Valiant, also written by Matt Kint, and that is apparently a sequel to Divinity. I say that because that's what I'd heard, and I was like, I have no idea how that works. Like what is this? It's apparently set in deep space with lots of aliens, and I'm like, okay, that could work. Having read Divinity, I can see where that comes in. But at the same time, I was like, well, what is Eternity? Is it any good? Is it the sort of thing I'd get custom bound? Having read it, I can confirm a couple of things. One, I did not like Eternity at all as a story. It's weaker than Divinity 1, 2, and 3, and as you can tell, I wasn't bowled over by Divinity 1, 2, and 3. The second thing I would say is the artwork is quite a departure, quite different. And the third thing I would say is definitely a direct sequel to not only to the trilogy, but it's a direct sequel actually to issue 0, which comes after the trilogy of Divinity stories. So Eternity would be slotting sort of here. I guess it's an important story, or it could be an important story for the future of the Valiant universe, depending on where they take the events of Eternity. But right now, I could happily live without it. It was okay as a read, but I'm more than happy with my Divinity hardcover as it is. Looking back, would I have bought this again? Yeah, I think so. It looks really nice. Divinity 1 is a pretty good story. Divinity 2 is a great story. Divinity 3 is okay again. And I think going into it now without any kind of like false expectations, yeah, it's decent. It's decent. Well worth a read. Cool. All right, guys. I hope that was helpful. This was my first hardcover read through. Next, I am going to bow to the court of popular opinion, and I will be starting at sort of a much more normal starting point for these comics, which will be Harbinger, I think. So I'm going to start with Harbinger Volume 1, the hardcover, and that'll be our next video.
All right, thanks for watching, everybody. As always, please like, comment, subscribe. As always, please follow me on Twitter at I am Thomas Judge, where I will post a daily review of whatever comics I've been reading. You can get an idea of what I'm up to on the channel. And as always, please support the channel by heading over to Amazon.com and checking out my prose novel about superheroes. It's a completely original piece of work. The first episode in it is called Arrivals, and the series as a whole is called No Gods or Kings. You can find an excerpt of that on my website, nogodsorkings.com. Until next time, everybody, stay classy.